Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com with the update on Steve Sarkisian. Here's the latest, what we're hearing on Monday, December 21st. Now, last week, there was a report that came out that said that Steve Sarkisian was expected to apply for the head coaching position at Auburn, so we wanted to come back and revisit that. Now, as you know, Alabama just defeated the Florida Gators in the SEC championship game by a score of 52-46. Steve Sarkisian's offense quite dynamic as usual, as they've been the entire season. So let's kind of provide the latest. And here's what we know. First of all, what we're hearing from sources that Steve Sarkisian turned down that interview. So Auburn reached out to Steve Sarkisian, and it looks from what we've gathered, kind of the intel that we have, that Steve Sarkisian turned down the interview and is currently renegotiating his contract with the University of Alabama. So if you were out there and you were worried about Steve Sarkisian potentially being poached by the Auburn Tigers, rest easy, because it looks like Steve Sarkisian will be back with the Alabama Crimson Tide, and currently those contract negotiations are in play. So as we continue to find out more, we'll bring that back to you on BamaInsider.com. Leading off, I'm pleasantly delighted to hear this, because I think that Steve Sarkisian, I don't feel that that's the right job for Steve Sarkisian. I think, in my opinion at least, I think his current setup with the Alabama Crimson Tide, he's straight rolling. And one of the things that I look at is the returning talent for the Crimson Tide, right? You have guys like John Mechie coming back. Now, look, Alabama's going to have, a lot of players go to the NFL draft. I would assume that, there's a lot of rebuilding to do with the Alabama offense. But if you look at the players that are returning, Steve Sarkisian has a wealth of talent, and I get it. Alabama reloads every single year. But look at, you got John Mechie to work with. Everybody saw the boom that he laid in the championship game against Florida. But much more than that, this is a guy who can be Alabama's next big-time wide receiver. You also got a five-star quarterback to work with in Bryce Young. Now, look, Bryce Young hasn't had a lot of opportunities this season. We really haven't seen him come out and really even showcase, I think, his true ability. And look, if you were to look at Mac Jones even a couple seasons ago, would you have felt that he would be in this position right now? So I think regarding Bryce Young, there's so much talent for him, very high ceiling, and let's see what Steve Sarkisian can do with him in another season or two. So you have him coming back. There's other playmakers on this team as well. Look at how Steve Sarkisian has been able to utilize Jahleel Billingsley. I think this guy is a type of player that can give people a lot of problems down the stretch. You look at Kyle Pitts, you look at Eric Gilbert, how those teams, LSU and Florida, have been creative to use those specific players. I think Alabama can do that with Jahleel Billingsley. You also got a very talented running back coming back in, Jace McClellan. This guy is pretty much lightning in a bottle. A lot of people look to this guy as that next Alabama running back to step up. Look, you got Trey Sanders, you got Kyle Edwards. We don't really know the status update on Killen Robinson, but a lot of those guys returning. Look, this is the next point. Look at all these guys that have that green check mark. Remember, we checked all those guys here on signing day. So much talent, and it starts up front. So you look at Tommy Brockemeyer being added as a 5-star. You look at J.C. Latham being added as a 5-star, the younger Brockemeyer. You look at Terrence Ferguson, who a lot of people feel could be Alabama's best offensive lineman coming into this class, believe it or not, just because of his talent at the guard position. You look at that Alabama guys that they added for the receiver position, right? We had that video on here talking about Christian Leary, talking about Ja'Cory Brooks, talking about JoJo Earl, talking about Ajay Hall. So much talent. And don't forget about Robbie Oots, their tight end. So as you can see, Steve Sarkisian, Nick Saban, Alabama loaded up on the offense. I didn't even mention the quarterback out of Texas, Jalen Milroe. All those guys certainly going to step up and contribute. So when you look long-term at Alabama, things aren't changing. And when you look to compare Alabama versus Auburn, even in the recruiting world, and I get Alabama had an incredible recruiting run this season. They always do, but, number one in the Rivals.com recruiting rankings, they finished out number one overall in the team rankings after this early signing period. Currently, Auburn sitting at number 52 overall. So I think in today's world of college football, how long do you really even get to build up a program, right? It's going to take, maybe 3 to 4 seasons, and you don't even really get that in football. So I think that when you look at Steve Sarkisian, and he has so much talent coming back, right? There's going to be some rebuilding, especially on the offensive line. But things don't change at Alabama. You have, the facilities. You have just the pageantry and the tradition that exists here. And I think, honestly, to be quite honest with you, I think that Steve Sarkisian could be the guy that replaces Nick Saban. Look, I have no idea how long Nick Saban is going to coach for. Me personally, I feel that he has a lot left in the tank. I think that he continues to show he's invigorated, right? When people asked him about if he was, still invigorated or if that came back to kind of inspire him after he missed that game against the Iron Bowl. Look, this guy has always been invigorated. But I think that when you look down the line, if Steve Sarkisian is able to renegotiate his contract for, let's say, I don't know, he's at 2.5 or 2.7 right now. If they can get him over that 3.5, 3.4 mark as an assistant coach, he'll be the highest paid assistant coach by probably $1 million. I think Kevin Steele of Auburn, their defensive coordinator, currently makes around the same, 2.5, something like that. So if they add on another $1 million to Sarkisian, he has all this talent. He has everything that he needs at the University of Alabama. He can continue to be mentored by Nick Saban and be around really this program that's straight up untouchable right now. As I mentioned before, and I always talk about this, when these assistants come to Alabama, I think most of them, if not all of them, want to be a head football coach at the next level. I think they want to take over college programs. Some might have aspirations to coach in the NFL, become NFL coaches. It's a game of rotating chairs with college football coaches, especially at Alabama, right? We really haven't seen that much continuity at Alabama because there's so many programs that want a piece of Alabama. So if you've even coached at Alabama for a couple seasons or two, you can really leapfrog your career at these other programs. But I think when you look at Steve Sarkisian, this guy clearly, he can be a head coach. I mean, he's going to have a lot of opportunities. But when you look at the landscape right now of college football, what opportunities are out there? And maybe none of those opportunities, are best suited for him. And maybe the best thing for him to do is just work with this returning talent that he has at Alabama and kind of, ride out however Nick Saban wants to coach and then take over the greatest college football dynasty of all time. That doesn't seem like a bad option to me. And I think Steve Sarkisian is smart enough to know that, knows the talent that he has coming back. We keep pointing to the fact that Alabama is going to have to shift around some positions at the offensive line. New guys are going to continue to step up. But when you look at the recruiting class, you look at the guys who have played as younger players at Alabama this season. There hasn't been many, but there's been guys that have definitely spot played. You see that Steve Sarkisian has a ton to work with. It's a great job for him if he can restructure his contract and he can become and retain being the highest offensive assistant, the highest assistant in all of college football. I think that's an excellent move strategically for Steve Sarkisian. So rest assured, looks like you're going to continue to have Steve Sarkisian play a key role with the Alabama Crimson Tide, which I think continues to keep the Alabama Crimson Tide at the forefront of the college football ranks. And I think really continues to make Alabama the number one offense in the entire country. What Steve Sarkisian's been able to do at the University of Alabama has been fantastic, from the quarterback play to really that balanced approach. I mean, look at the overall production during the SEC championship game. The balance that Alabama has had on offense since Sarkisian has taken over at Alabama has really been what has set Alabama apart. Look, Devontae Smith, 15 receptions, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mac Jones, 33 of 43, 418 yards with 5 touchdowns against Florida. And then Najee Harris, 248 yards of offense with 5 total touchdowns. And I think when you have an offensive mind that can be creative. Look, I love the play where they split Najee out wide. He ran a stop pattern and then came back in as a post pattern. I mean, that stuff is very creative. I get back to the fact of how Sarkisian was able to use Billingsley. This guy is who you want at Alabama. The University of Alabama knows that. I'm not surprised to see Sarkisian turn down that offer or turn down an interview from the Auburn Tigers to be at the place that he needs to be, which is the University of Alabama.